This is Nan Michael with Kaleidoscope and with my co-producer, Jane Penwell. I won't call us names.
I was going to say,
time.
AKA Motor Mouth, yeah. I'll do it myself.
AKA Crone.
I don't know why that tickles me so much, but it does.
The Crone or Motor Mouth?
Both of them just make me laugh. So thank you, whoever said that, thank you, because it just tickles me.
Now let's confess, it doesn't take much to make you laugh.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I could be insulted. I could be angry. I do get angry. But I'm not at all. I just think it's kind of funny. And as a matter of fact, I thought that could be, if Kaleidoscope goes by the wayside, we'll just have a new program, C&M.
You know, I thought about that, but the name Kaleidoscope has a history, and I needed to ditch that.
I agree.
Well, first, was it Jack Parr or Johnny Carson that used to start out his programs with letters and news items?
Well, Jay Leno did, too. I don't remember
Jack Parr.
No. I wasn't allowed to stay up that late probably at that time. But Johnny Carson, I think he used to have them. Yeah, people would write in and send him clips and all that kind of thing. I say we should call this beginning part of the program, Kaleidoscope program, Hot Topics, after what they do. You know, this is The View. Do you ever watch The View? Barbara Walters just left. And they begin their show with a discussion of whatever's current and call it Hot Topics. So these are our hot topics.
Right, and the first one is that a record number of American babies are being named after guns.
Like
Colt, Remington, Ruger. Let's see, 118 were named Ruger. 666. Isn't that a biblical term?
That's the devil, sign of the devil.
Colt, named Colt. So I think that's significant.
I do too. But do you think that they consciously said, I want to name this baby after a gun and called it Colt, or do you think they were unaware? I think some people would be unaware that there's a gun called a Colt. Don't you think? Remington, I mean, that's kind of obscure.
It's kind of a what?
Obscure.
Yes, it is.
So maybe
Ruger. How about Ruger?
Ruger, that's it. I mean, I don't know any other. Ruger. You know, but I think some of those people were probably unaware of that connotation of the name. But then there's going to be people who are completely, you know, aware of it.
It does reflect the culture, though. I mean, if they weren't aware of the connection, they certainly have been exposed to those words.
You would think. You would think. If I named my kid after a gun, I'd have to name the kid Daisy Air Rifle. I had a Daisy Air Rifle, and my mother did not want me to have that Daisy Air Rifle. She thought that was ridiculous for a girl to want a Daisy Air Rifle. But I grew up with all boys, and they all had one, and we'd go down in the woods, and they'd shoot. They never shot anything live, but, you know, put up targets and shoot and everything. And I didn't get to do it, and I just begged, and finally I got my Daisy Air Rifle. So it was my prized possession.
How old were you when you finally got it?
Oh, probably 10. Imagine 10. And the boys got theirs when they were 8, maybe, much younger than me. And I had to always beg them to let me shoot the Daisy Air Rifle, and I got sick of that, you know, in a hurry. Because they'd be like, well, I don't know. So I finally got my own. My mother said I was going to shoot my eye out. And Johnny Landers lived across the road from us, so I got him to come over and bring his Daisy Air Rifle, and I demonstrated to my mother it was a physical impossibility for me to shoot my eye out because my arms weren't long enough to pull the trigger. I almost got a whipping on that one, I can tell you, for being a smart aleck.
Well, another item, a hot item, is UFOs.
Oh,
of
I
course.
love UFOs. That topic endlessly fascinates me.
UFO sightings in Canada are sky high
Wonder why in Canada?
for the second year in a row. The 1,180 reports of UFOs in 2013 were topped only by a record in 2012. Most in the west of Canada, and many of the reports came in by pilots or police.
Oh, so very, very reputable folk, not your usual slightly odd person, shall we say.
We're not exactly trying to coax in the UFO segment of viewers, but
I gotta
it
tell
is
you,
exciting.
it is, and I love that show, Ancient Aliens. Have you ever watched that?
The what?
Ancient Aliens. It's a TV show on the History Channel. Oh, hey. They talk about on there different aspects of history and how what the legend is could have possibly been an alien encounter. You know, Zeus, gods, all kinds of things, all the way back to the very ancient, most ancient civilizations. And they show their, for example, in the some of the Egyptian tombs, there are pictures of people looking like they're wearing helmets, space helmets, you know, stuff like that. I just think it's fascinating. And I have no belief system. In other words, you know, to me, to believe in something is an act of faith. I don't have that. I don't know whether they were or they weren't, or they are or they aren't. I just find it fascinating. And hey, if they're there, I would be even more fascinated to see the little buggers. But, you know, I highly doubt that's going to happen. But you never know. I think that we are extremely naive if we believe that if they have been visiting Earth, okay, that we believe that they're benevolent. They seem to think that they're benevolent. I'm not so much on that. Because I saw the movie Alien. Did you see that movie? Scare you to death.
No, I don't think I did. I've read Whitney Strieber, though.
Well, the alien, in the movie The Alien, was a bug. But he was 7 feet tall and had the strength of 3 or 4 men, very smart. And it's really, really scary because of the fact that they're in space, you know, and you can't just run away from this thing because you're in a spacecraft. So I don't really think, you know, everything out there is going to be benevolent. And maybe I think we should leave well enough alone and hope they don't find us.
When we're talking about getting trips to other planets set, we would be on the other, she would be on the other foot, because we would be saying, like, come in peace, please.
Exactly. Well, and just think about the diseases. You know, when Columbus came to the New World, he didn't intend to harm the Indians. I don't think he intentionally had any idea of doing that. But they got smallpox and measles and all these diseases that they'd never been exposed to. I mean, there's a danger just in contact because of alien viruses and bacteria and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Well, you saw they found Columbus's ship.
Yeah.
Well, the next topic is a little grim, I think, but it may be my imagination. They found out that if you take an old mouse and take the blood out of a young mouse and put it in the old mouse, that it grows younger.
Oh, well, that's nice.
What do you mean that's nice?
I
Can't
think
you
that's
see
nice.
what some of these rich scalawags are going to do. Instead of selling organs, they're going to be selling babies' blood.
On to suck your blood will come true. Well, no, I don't think that'll happen because they'll find whatever it is in the blood that I don't know what. There's something in the blood, some
Miracle,
thing that's
yeah.
that's doing this. It isn't all blood. It isn't the fact that it's blood. There's something in the younger blood that's causing this spurt of youth to occur. So they'll find out what that is and give you a shot. You won't need to worry. You don't have to go and suck somebody's blood.
I wouldn't do it. Moi. I'm thinking about some of these 1%ers that can burn their money and
Right, get somebody and get
buy
a transfusion.
a couple of gallons of newborn blood and,
There you go.
and
Anything is possible, but I think it sounds a little bit premature because how many things have we heard they cured cancer in a mouse and then it didn't come true with people? So, you just, we're not exactly like a mouse. So I wonder. It sounds plausible to me, very plausible, but I don't know. And people have probably already done it. Haven't I heard somewhere? I don't know now, but somewhere I believe I've heard in the past that this was a kind of a treatment that, like you said, people who could afford it, like go to Switzerland and have these youth treatments. And I think transfusion was one of the things they got.
well, I know they used to let blood
Yeah,
bleed
a
people.
little bit different. That was for high blood pressure and stuff. But, maybe you could cure two things with a single stone, have somebody who's got high blood pressure and they could do away with some blood, take it out of them, they'll be better off, and give it to this poor old guy over here. Hey, perfect.
You think high blood pressure means you have an excess of blood?
Well, it's what I think. It's what they thought when they were doing that, They thought that. I don't know. I don't know if high blood pressure is caused from the volume of blood in your body or what. I don't know. But I know that's what they thought. 200 years ago, that's what they thought. Which is
okay.
why they let your blood out, because they thought that there was too much of it for some reason.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think you've probably got the perfect amount of blood in your body. It's just your veins and arteries get narrower, as plaque and things build up. That's why you tend to get higher blood pressure as you get older, I think. And they're not as flexible either. So, anyhow, if anybody out there is thinking about getting a blood transfusion, don't use a mouse. That won't work.
oh Lord.
Although I could say that in my house, I think I have one that I could spare. My cat keeps chasing. It's at night. I'm upstairs. She's downstairs. And I hear this pitter, 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 pitter. And I think she's chasing something, but I don't know. If I turn the light on, then she stops. And, I don't know what it was.
Well, tell me, have you viewed any of your grandson's videos?
No, I have not. These are videos that I took of them, or they took of me. The ones they took of me are not highly flattering, so I doubt you'll be seeing those.
That would be interesting.
Oh, wouldn't it though? Uh-huh. Well, we'll see. Maybe I'll throw one in for comic relief. There's a cute one of my one grandson rapping. He does a rap, and his sister makes noises in the background. That's pretty cute. And there's another one where they put on some kind of a crazy little play, but even I can't figure out what it's about, so I won't inflict that on you. But there are some cute ones over the years. And so the reason she's asking me this is I got a new computer or laptop, and I told my son I would give him, for the kids, my old laptop, but I couldn't something went wrong with my new laptop and I couldn't get the pictures to go over from my old one to my new one. You know, before you just connect them with a cord and you just take them on over. It just wouldn't happen. So my son said, get a flash drive, and he would sit and take all the pictures off my old computer and put them on the flash drive. Then I can put them on the new computer. So that's what he did. And so now I have a whole flash drive, like 30 gigabytes of pictures. So you say, have I looked at them all? No, 30 gigabytes. And they're all in little groups, and I have to open up to find out what they are and so on and so forth. But, you know, if I can find, I know I have some folders that are just full of videos, if I can just find those folders. But I didn't name them properly, and, you know, it's just a mess. So as I put them on my new laptop, I'm going to, you know, give them all names so I'll know what they are and so on and so forth, instead of just sticking them on there.
Well, why don't we continue with our fascinating news after
Hot topics.
Hot Topic.
Because I've got one, so I'm just waiting.
Well, you give it to us after I interview David Malawista.
Okay.
And we'll come back.
That'll be interesting. You'll enjoy that.
Well, we're happy to have Dave Malawista
That's correct.
with us today. And you may have read in the paper he was one of the possibilities for sheriff. Is that right?
That's correct.
And he has quite a history in Athens, especially with law enforcement and psychology. So where should we start?
Wherever you'd like.
Okay, how about with your education? You went to OU.
I did my graduate studies here at OU, did my undergraduate studies at Oberlin College in the northern part of the state, and that's how I got to Ohio. I came down here to Athens in 1968, and I've been here ever since.
1968, well, that's longer than me. And how did you first gravitate to law enforcement?
It's sort of a complex story. I took a year off between college and grad school and wanted to work with people because I knew I was going to go into psychology. And really an undergraduate degree in psychology doesn't really lead to very much.
No.
But I had an opportunity to work with juvenile delinquents, kids that had been in trouble with the law. And in the course of my work with the juveniles, I had to spend time at police stations because my kiddies would get into trouble, and I'd have to go there and talk and find out what the problem was and what needed to be done and deal with the court systems. And it was sort of interesting for me because while I grew up relatively close to New York City, about 60 miles away, it was a very rural community, and there was essentially no crime and no law enforcement. And so law enforcement figures, police, were these sort of foreign authority figures and people to be avoided and kind of scary, things, people you didn't want to have contact with because it meant you were in trouble. And it was a very different kind of interaction I was having because when I went to the police station, often these individuals were very concerned about the kids. They knew a great deal about their families. They knew the problems they were having. They gave me a great deal of information. And I was really quite struck by how they presented as being way different than I had imagined. And so I started talking with them, and they suggested that I come on ride-alongs. And so I proceeded to spend evenings. I worked during the day and did ride-alongs during the evening. And after about a couple of weeks of that, one of the departments had a vacancy, and they said, why don't you join us? And they knew I was only going to be there for a year, but it sounded like a grand adventure. So I became...
And what auspices were you?
It was with the city of Oberlin. It was in the town...
Oberlin, okay, you were there.
In the city. And so I became a city patrolman and experienced what life behind the windscreen of a police car was like, and taking calls and doing all kinds of things. And I thought, okay, that would be the end when I left. At the end of my year, I turned in my badge and other identification, turned in my uniform, and came back to to Athens, and began my graduate career, and then went on to working at what was then the Athens State Hospital. Had many names during the course of my tenure there, but became a psychologist at the state hospital. And after about 4 years there, I was approached by some people who worked in the city, and they said, "We understand that you'd worked as a patrolman, and would you be interested in doing that part-time in the city of Athens?" And I went,
Wow.
hadn't thought about it, but sure, I would be happy to look into that. And so early in 1974, March of 1974, I was sworn in as a police officer here in Athens, and I've been one ever since, still am.
And there was a period when you rode around in a police car.
Every week,
With
in uniform, as a
in
police
uniform.
officer. I was, again, I took calls. I was sometimes by myself. I was sometimes what's called a second man in the car. So there were two-man cars, so we could take the more difficult calls. But yeah, I took all kinds of calls.
So were you still full-time at the mental health center?
Yes, yeah, I did. Work is not, I've never had less than 2 jobs since the time I turned 22, and sometimes more than that. So working the two jobs was never a particular burden.
Well, what was it like going fresh into work at the hospital?
It was enormously interesting and stimulating. It was at a time when there were 1,500 patients in residence at the psych hospital, and we had about 650, sometimes a little more, 650 admissions a year. And so one got to experience individuals with a wide range of psychopathology, and it was just fascinating to me to see mental illness in all its forms and learn how to begin to start treating those conditions. It was just really, really a very exciting time. We had a fairly substantial staff. We had multiple psychiatrists. We had 6 psychologists. We had consultants from the university who came up and did training. It was a great time. I really, really enjoyed my work there.
But you gave it up for police work.
No, that's not true. I worked at the hospital for 30 years, actually a little longer, almost 31.
30?
31.
Wow.
And so I actually retired from the hospital in 1999 after
Really? Okay.
after 31 years of state service, and then continued working in psychology in my private practice. I'd always had a private practice while I was working at the hospital. In the beginning, it was mostly therapy. I did psychotherapy and had a fairly active caseload. And gradually over time, I did more and more assessments for various people. And after leaving the hospital, the demand for particularly forensic assessments became so great that my practice has moved almost exclusively to that now.
Okay. So when did you start training officers?
Well, I think what you're talking about primarily is what's called CIT, or Crisis Intervention Team training. This is a model for dealing with people with significant mental illness or people who are in psychological crisis that dates back now 25 years. It started in Memphis, Tennessee. It resulted in an incident that happened there in 1988 where officers approached an individual, they got a call, approached an individual who was in a psychological crisis, who was armed, had a large knife, and the officers arrived on scene, and when they went to try to get him under control, he came at them and they drew their sidearms and shot him and killed him. And in the exchange from their arriving to their interaction with the individual to the time he was dead was about 90 seconds. And so there was a significant uproar in the mental health community. The local NAMI and family and friends of people with various mental health issues were very troubled by this. They did not imply that the officers did anything wrong. They sued the department, not the individual officers. They maintained that the officers did nothing wrong. They sued the department because they believed the officers had not been adequately trained to deal with those kinds of issues and learn how to de-escalate them. The training that was provided for officers is called command and control. You arrive at a situation that is potentially volatile. You get it under control as quickly as possible. It uses loud commands, command presence, and use of force. And you get that person or that situation under control in as quick period of time as you possibly can. The problem is somebody who is really mentally ill can't manage those commands very well. And often all it does is the loud noise, the stimulation, the lights, the sirens, whatever. It stimulates them even more. And it gets them churned up and potentially they act out. Also, there's the issue that they may not be able to understand what the officers are saying because they're hearing and or seeing things beyond what the officers are saying to them. And so it's hard for them to process that and respond appropriately. So the NAMI group wanted the officers to be trained to manage these situations differently. So they got together with the Memphis Police Department and spent about a year devising a training corps program that would train officers how to manage these situations. And that was the beginning of CIT, and it has progressed outward from there. Came to Ohio pretty early in the, I think, 1990. Went to Akron, and from Akron it spread throughout much of the state. And right now we have about 86 of our 88 counties have at least one agency that's had CIT training.
Now remind me, CIT, what is?
It stands for Crisis, Intervention, Team, and Training.
Okay, now do all the officers get this, or is it just their crisis team?
Well, there are two models, and there is some controversy about how this training should be delivered. The Memphis model, which is the people who originated this system, say that you should train about 20 to 25% of your officers. And those people should be all voluntary people who raise their hand and say, I want to be a CIT officer, that they are vetted for skills, verbal skills and people skills, that clearly they are interested in interacting with people in a way that's different than what they normally do. And the reason they go 20%, 25% of the people is the view is that to do this well, you have to do it regularly. And while maybe 1 in 10 police calls involve somebody with some mental health issues, you want the people who take these calls to be particularly skilled. And so the more you do, the better you get at it. So we want select people to take those calls and manage those situations. For a rural county, again, the problem was when that kind of training came to this part of the world, many of our departments are small. And if you train 20% of Nelsonville Police Department, you train one officer. And so what happens when it's not his shift, or he's on vacation, or it's his weekend off? There is also the issue is that CIT training has shown to be of great value to protecting officers from physical violence against them, not only protecting the individuals they interact with. The consumers do much better. The chances of them being physically injured or accosted or certainly killed it goes down by a factor of about 75%. But similar numbers applies to officers. They get hurt much less frequently. So one of the issues we've had is how can you not at least expose all your officers to this because it becomes a safety issue. So for the small communities, we want to train as many people as we possibly can. Currently, we have 37 full-time and half-time officers that are sworn officers in Athens, the Athens PD.
Oh, in
and
Athens. Goodness.
and of that number, all but 2 have been trained.
Wow.
And they're about to retire. So it was kind of like, well, we're not going to put the energy into people who are going out
long.
who are going out the door in about 4 months, 5 months. So essentially the whole department is trained. And the university police, they're virtually completely trained. And about half the sheriff's department is trained.
So do tell me your official title. I looked Dave up on the internet, and I couldn't believe his official title.
Well, in different places, I have different titles.
Okay,
Again,
what the most impressive,
I don't
all-encompassing one?
I'm not sure there is one because there are so many roles I play in so many different places. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist when I do my psychology things. I am the reserve commander at the Athens Police Department, and I'm in charge of the halftime unit, and again, am the coordinator for CIT training for one of the coordinators for the local area. So those
Must have been the part that did have commander in there.
could be.
I translated in my head as the Grand Poobah.
I was militating for Emperor of the Universe, but that apparently was already taken, so I had to live with Commander.
And so when the police have a really difficult client to deal with, sometimes they call you.
Oh yeah, I still get called. There was a time I was called exclusively because I was the person who had the knowledge to deal with those problems. Again, the city staff has always been extraordinarily good at identifying people with psychological problems and knew, okay, this is over my head. I better call David, see if he can come in and help out. But that doesn't work very well if I'm not there. I'm home. I have to get myself together. I have to get there. Suppose I'm out of town, so vacation, whatever. So it works much better when we have other people trained. Still, if we have a really difficult case or one that's stretching out over time, say somebody who has taken hostages or somebody who's threatening suicide over a period of time, I may in fact get those kind of calls still.
And you are paid by
The city.
the city. Okay.
For police, for the kind of police work, yes.
Yeah. What do they do about double diagnoses?
Well, they attend to those and try to make, again, the notion is to make the proper referrals when at all possible. The notion is to divert from corrections, from the regional jail whenever possible. And so we utilize whatever resources are available. And unfortunately, the pool of resources has declined with the support for most social services.
In Athens especially?
Well, I think actually Athens is better than most because we have a population that is attuned to the notion of caring for people with mental illness.
NAMI.
NAMI, but again, we have a history of having a major psychiatric facility in our midst since the mid 1870s. So it's kind of like we're used to providing care for people from this population. And so with that sensitivity, they've been interested in providing as much care as being fiscally responsible will allow. We have sort of a crisis center the drop-off center where people can stay who are in the midst of a problem, but not so sick that they need to be hospitalized, but they can get care and supervision and whatever.
Is that Tri-County's, is it respite?
It's called respite. It's the respite house, and it's just off of Dairy Lane. It's on Dairy Lane. But there's the hospital, We have the used to be MRDD, it's now disabilities services provide for people with intellectual deficits that are in trouble. Those are relatively rare cases. We don't have a lot of that clientele being in much trouble, so we don't need to avail ourselves of their services very much, but they have made themselves available when we've needed them. We look at talking to the people from substance abuse who provide substance abuse services whenever we have somebody who has a co-existing diagnosis of addiction along with their mental illness. The notion is, what is the appropriate placement for that particular individual? It's only when a major criminal act has been done do we look to incarcerate. I mean, we tried very hard to find alternative placements for people.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, it would be kind of difficult to have a mentally ill person in crisis on drugs.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And again, most of the substances that are being abused really make the mental illness worse. It's really a problem. But a lot of facilities, like the state hospital, will not take somebody who is acutely intoxicated, either on alcohol or other substances. They don't have the facilities for dealing with that, and so they send them to Oblenis for a while, or if they're really problematic, they can be held at the regional jail until they're detoxified, and then they can make a referral. Somebody will go to the jail for 6 hours, 12 hours, and then the Tri-County will go and evaluate them, and if they're appropriate, they will then get them transferred to the hospital.
Well, it sounds like a very exciting job.
It can be. It's enjoyable because it's never the same. There are always interesting things, and it's an opportunity to intervene positively in people's lives in a very immediate sort of way. It's one of the things when I was doing therapy, work with people, it was very gratifying to see the opportunity to see them get better, make changes in their lives, whatever. But it might take a year, 2 years, or whatever. These are kinds of interventions that you can make life-altering changes in an evening. It's pretty exciting.
Wow. And you're still doing private practice?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Well, what else should I ask you about? How about your work around the state?
Okay. Both in psychology and in my work doing CIT training, I had traveled around the state. I've provided expert testimony around forensic issues, court issues that touch on mental illness in 26 counties around the state. And
that spreads you kind of thin, doesn't it?
well, it's not. I'm not in all those counties all the time, but it's over the years I have traveled around quite a bit, and the training lately has been how to develop CIT programs from the very ground up. There's been a big push in Ohio to get all the counties involved. And there were big blocks of counties. One was around Ross County, the 5-county served by the Adam H. Board there, Scioto Paint Valley. And they wanted to get a program up and running and had no idea how to do it. And so the state NAMI asked me to go there and train them and how to do that. And so I spent about a year driving back and forth talking with the stakeholders about how to go about setting these up and getting them planned, talking about the curriculum, talking about who should be doing the training, what kinds of things needed to be trained, what kind of buy-in you had to get from the local law enforcement and correction groups. And it was very successful. They've been doing it now every 6 months now for the last 2 years. I'm going back in June to do some training in one of their classes. That'll be kind of fun. And then I traveled up north to Belmont, Harrison, and Monroe counties. There's a 3-county area catchment up there, and they had no CIT training at all, had no idea how to get it up and running, and spent about a year with them, giving them manuals, how to do it. Here are the courses that need to be taught. Here are some of the people who you can get to do some of the teaching. Spent 3 days in that course going up and actually doing teaching for them.
Can you give me an idea of what's in the curriculum?
Well, there's sort of a basic kind of things. Here, one of them is to expose officers to the various kinds of psychopathology they're likely to encounter, and I do it on 2 different levels. One is, here's just an exposure. We don't expect anybody to be a psychologist or social worker. We don't expect you to make diagnoses. Just if you hear a term, this is kind of what people are talking about. It's just kind of a little things to think about when you see. And these are kinds of symptoms that you're likely to encounter. And what I like to add to that, I also try to do, here are some of the risks that are associated with those particular kinds of pathology that an officer needs to be aware of. I mean, if you have somebody who's really manicky, they can be very happy and upbeat and positive right up until you say no to them, and then they get very irritable and cranky. And so how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? So I try to talk to them about that. If you encounter a paranoid or a paranoid schizophrenic, how do you manage that paranoia in a way that's not likely to make them confrontational with you? So there's a little extra piece to it. We talk about resources in an area. If you have an individual who has these kind of problems, what kind of referrals can you make? So we introduce them to various agencies and have them come and speak.
Yeah.
We have consumers come and present, because it's really important for officers to be exposed to individuals who have had very significant psychopathology, who've received treatment, who've recovered, and whose lives are way better because of those things. Because it motivates them to go, gee, these people really do make improvements. I can help them go from what I see here on the street to being a productive citizen. And so that really helps motivate them. We typically have family members come in and talk about what it's like to have an out-of-control loved one, and what it's like to have police officers who are good come and help, and also what it's like to have officers who aren't very good at it and the problems that creates. And again, it's that kind of feedback. We spend a whole day, sometimes a day and a half, doing role plays, which we essentially have individuals who have skills being actors come and play people with various psychopathology, and we get the officers to practice the skills.
Oh, that should be interesting.
We spend a whole day on communication and de-escalation, how to listen productively in a therapeutic way. What is that person really saying? They can be screaming and ranting and raving, but that's only what's happening here. Often it's because they're really afraid. They're really upset. They're responding to hallucination, whatever. And to learn to not just hear the words, but hear the music, what's going on underneath. And to respond to the person's needs, not just the yelling and the noise at the top. There's a lot of things. It's 40 hours, 40 very intense hours of training. And then we do usually 2, 3, 4 updates or advanced trainings a year on top of that. Those tend to be a half day, 1 day, sometimes a couple of days, but never the full week the way our original one is.
Do you have a smaller number of specialists in dealing with suicidal patients?
No, we give, that's one of the core chunks of the curriculum, is how to deal with individuals who are suicidal, because it's unfortunately not that uncommon for officers to encounter. So there's no particular people who are specialized. There are some people whose de-escalation skills, whose sensitivity, whose working with people is better than others, and those people get identified, and those are the ones who often get called if they're available. So that's how you do that. And again, we do advanced training, so the people who are really into this start to build their tool belt, if you will. As time goes on, they get a lot of skill.
Wow. Well, I'm certainly glad that I thought to call you, and I'm sure glad you got back in touch with me.
You bet, it was fun. Thanks for calling me.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Well, I certainly enjoyed that interview with David Malawista, and he agreed to come back in about 9 months and update us on what's going on at the CIT.
Well, I'm always impressed by a man with a gun. So,
She saw his gun. He had it on his other side, and I didn't see it, but I did see his beautiful police badge.
I noticed that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rare here in the studio. In fact, this may be the one and only time we see somebody with a gun on their strapped to their side. But Nan and I both used to work in prisons, so you know, and it doesn't bother me. I was just interested in thinking, gosh, you know, what is it like to live a life where you always have a gun? You know, that's interesting to me. I can't imagine that.
Well, I get mine from mystery stories.
Yeah. I have a student who's a Columbus Police Department detective. And every once in a while, I do see him, you know, when you're watching the news and somebody got murdered, I'll see him in the background. And
A picture of him.
No, he's really a detective. He's a real guy. He's my student.
You see him, what, on the video or in your classroom?
No, if I'm watching the news
Oh, okay.
and they're showing a video of a murder, I have several times I've seen him in the background, you know, in doing his thing, whatever it may happen to be. And he also is in the, I think it's Army, National Guard. So he lives a life where guns are, they're, you know, commonplace, everyday things for him is to have a gun.
I wonder what his kid's name is.
I'll have to ask him. He's got two. I don't know what their names are. But I say all this to say, and this guy that you interviewed, similar too, Chad does not look like anybody who would ever be what he is. You know, when we say detective, you think, big, hard-boiled guy, you know, smoking a cigarette.
Sam Spade.
Yeah. Oh, he's not like that at all. He's a very, very, he's a nice-looking but ordinary-looking guy. Average height, average weight. You wouldn't remember him if you saw him. You know, he just doesn't stand out. And I think to myself, once I think that over, that's probably a lot better. You know. Oh, yeah. Because you don't really want these guys to pick you out of a crowd necessarily. But we ought to interview him someday if we want to get into law enforcement, because he's got a million stories, that guy.
I get kind of interested when I see presidents and vice presidents on television and shaking hands and everything, and I like to spot the Secret Service people.
Yeah, yeah.
And Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
Halloween, I spot them.
Did you see the movie Bridesmaids by any chance?
I don't know.
Well,
is it an old movie?
It's about 5 or 6 years old, something like that. Anyway, those of you, if you did see Bridesmaids, you remember that the Melissa McCarthy character, she got on a plane. She was going somewhere on a plane, and she felt that she had identified the Secret Service, the undercover guy who, you know, they say there's one on every flight, you know, on a plane. She felt that she had identified him, that she knew who he was. And she sat next to him, and she kept saying, I know you're an undercover Secret Service. He keeps going, no, I'm not. Why do you say that? And she goes, I know you are. You can't fool me. Nobody would ever remember your face. That's got to be you. You know, this goes on, and he keeps saying, no. And of course, a situation arises where he has to stand up, pull his gun, you know, and she's just, oh my, she's just like, I knew it, I told you, I knew it. So she's so proud of herself because she identified him out of all the people on the plane. So, you know, which is kind of interesting because when you get on a plane, you don't think some guy sitting there with a big old gun, you know, just in case there's some terrorist on there or something. I mean, I never think of that. I think of planes as being boring places where I play games and read, you know. So, but au contraire to what you may think, evidently there is one of these guys on just about every flight in the United States.
Well, I must confess I'm one of those tacky or trashy people that just hung on CNN for the plane mystery.
Oh, well, me too. I don't think that's tacky or trashy. I think that's, I mean, how often in our lifetimes do we have a true mystery? That is a true mystery. What happened to that plane? I think that people all over the world just got caught up in that because it's so far outside your normal life pattern, you know. And it hasn't been resolved yet, and we don't know if it ever will be.
And it seems to me that both the pilot and the co-pilot, they had nice eyes. And I hate to think.
Somebody probably
don't
said that
know
about
what happened.
Osama bin Laden, too. Oh, he was such a nice boy when he lived next door to me. That's what they always say about these killers, you know.
Well, he was. I think I said it on this program before. I think his face looked very peaceful and spiritual. But that's only half of it, I guess.
Yeah, behind that peaceful face. Well, you know, that probably had to do with his motivations for doing what he did. He really didn't, I think he did not do what he did because he wanted to kill people. I think he did what he did because he believed that he had the righteous path, you know, to whatever, salvation, I don't know. So I think that was his way of getting to where he wanted to be or where he thought the world should be, which is different than, you know, some of these guys. But nothing would surprise me less than if it was one of those pilots, because it seems to be impossible that that plane could have done all that stuff on its own, turned around, you know. I mean, it has to be somebody was in control. So if it wasn't those pilots, I think it had to be somebody. And whether or not they went down in the Indian Ocean, or remember there was that ark, and it was the Indian Ocean down here, and I don't know, Uzbekistan or somewhere up in here. Who knows, where they may find it and crashed in those mountains someday. You just know, we just don't know. Obviously.
You know, the people that are watching public access to get away from CNN are
have not
gonna
succeeded.
be disappointed with us today.
I guess so, but I truly, I just think that's I mean, a real life great mystery that we were all fascinated with. You shouldn't feel bad about yourself for that at all. So I have a hot topic. Are you ready?
I don't know.
It's a kind of hot one. I grew up in a family where my father would have been a football coach if he could have been, but he wasn't able to go to college because it was during the Depression and nobody had any money and he had to go to work. He had 4 younger brothers and sisters, blah, blah, blah. Familiar tale. So in our family, we watched football. So I became a football fan, like my parents, and we went to football games and so on and so forth. My father thought he was Woody Hayes. You know, he loved to go to Ohio State football. He thought Woody was the greatest. This is how I grew up. So I was so surprised to hear that a young player, football player from Missouri, came out as gay in his college, final year in college, and got drafted into the NFL. I thought that was, I mean, I'm still reeling from that because I just assumed that those guys who would be the owners of the teams would be like my father, who would have, I don't know what he would have done. I can't even imagine. To him, football was a man's game, you know. And so I just think that's so interesting that our society has moved along in my lifetime far enough that a young guy who is a good football player. He's an excellent, great football player. Now has the opportunity to play for the NFL as openly gay.
And also get married.
Yeah, I mean, he can get married to his boyfriend. And actually, when he got drafted, he kissed his boyfriend.
I saw
Did
that.
you see that?
Yes, yes.
So
We got the high sign
amazing.
in there.
Oh, I
He
have.
said-
Wait till we get to my hot topic and then cut me off, but that's
No,
okay.
we got
That's okay.
maybe 15 seconds to say.
Okay, well, in 15 seconds, I will say, too bad, HS. That's my father. Too bad, HS. The world has moved along now, and this is proof of it. So your world is no longer, I'm afraid.
And maybe we can look forward to some of Jane's home videos shot by her grandson.
Oh, dear. Now they're going to be
Next.
saying, not only is she motor mouth, now we have to look at her grandchildren, too. They're not that bad.
So let's say goodbye to
Au revoir, Athens.
Athens.
And we're looking forward to seeing you the next time. And don't let my grandchildren put you off. They won't be that bad, I promise.